Rolling. Excellent. So good Chodesh, everyone. I just want to run through the final. I actually want to just do a quick summary of the points I made in the last Shiur. Partly because I made a little hash of Rashi, and I thank Adam for pointing that out. I reflect on Adam's comment after the Shiur. With the wonders of modern technology, the recording I sent you, I tweaked and I corrected my mistake. I meant to acknowledge Adam in so doing, but I forgot to. So I apologize for that, but I'll acknowledge him now. So just very, very briefly, hopefully avoiding confusion this time, we have a Gemara that tells us that included in Dosh, that quotes the Brisa, that included in Dosh is also menafet and menafet. Menafet means flax, linen, and menafet means cotton. So learns Rashi. And Rashi says that menafet should really have been one would think that menafet should be a tolda of menafets, but the distinction is that it is gedulei karka. Now, there's 2 points to make on this. Menafets seems to be very similar to dosh, that you're literally beating or striking the linen seeds to remove the flax from its shell, and that, says Tosfos on Ein Daled Omid Aleph, is all but identical to dosh. It doesn't qualify as a separate melacha, even though it took place in the Mishkan, because it is so similar to dosh. One's with wheat and one's with flax, but beyond that, they're really pretty much the same thing. Menafet, on the other hand, seems to be more similar to combing, and therefore Rashi thought that it should be a tolda of nifuts, of the melacha of combing wool. And Rashi says the distinction is that it is not that it's gedulei karka, and therefore it qualifies as a tolda of dosh. And it turns out that Rashi, that if we combine the Rashi and the Tosfos together, that the Brisa is non-symmetrical. Even though the Brisa says that menafet and dosh are all melacha achas, what it really means is that dosh and menafet are literally one melacha, a co-ovus, and menafet is a tolda. That's what comes out in the sugya. So that's point number one. Point number two is that Rashi's point, the reason he says why nifut, menafet, is not a tolda of wool, but a tolda of dosh, is because it's gedulei karka. I don't think that Rashi is an explicit source for learning that dosh is only with gedulei karka. I don't think that's what Rashi's saying. All Rashi is saying is which melacha you categorize the tolda under. I don't think we can prove conclusively that Shittas Rashi is that if it was non-gedulei karka, it couldn't be dosh. Rashi says the opposite. It's because it is gedulei karka, therefore it's not a tolda of wool, of nifut semeh. He doesn't say that if it's not gedulei karka, it can't be a tolda of dosh, and that's just a point of logic. So that's pretty much where we got up to. I left us all a little bit of homework, and thank you for those who posted links to try and understand what exactly is the mechanics of the melacha, but we'll get to that near the end of Shiur, I hope, when that will become important. For now, the reason I make this point of logic, by the way, in Rashi is just for accurate reading of Rashi. Rashi doesn't say that he holds that disha is only with gedulei karka. He says that it can't be a tolda of it because it's gedulei karka. So I just want just a point of logic in the careful reading and the length of the language of Rashi. I don't think this is a clear source that Rashi holds that disha is not with gedulei karka. Now, having said that, the Rambam is explicit that dosh is only gedulei karka, and I put this on the source sheets, I hope. And this is the Rambam that we really saw already. The Rambam is of the view that the Rambam here in Perek Ches Halacha Zayin, the Rambam says that ein disha elo b'gedulei karka. The Rambam does say that disha is only with gedulei karka. The Rambam also though goes on and says that cholev is a tolda of dosh. And the question is, as we saw in the previous sugya, how can cholev be a tolda of dosh? when a Tosus proves that a cow is seemingly not Gedolei Karka, and nonetheless, the Rambam says Dosh is only Gedolei Karka. So there are two answers to this question. One was the answer of Rabbi Zobin ben Harambam, who said that a Tolda and an Av don't have the same rules. And the second was the answer of the Maggid Mishnah, who said that an animal does count as Gedolei Karka according to the view of the Rambam, not like Tosus, and it's a machlokas, Rambam and Tosus, where an animal counts as Gedolei Karka. Now, if the Rambam learns that an animal counts as Gedolei Karka, how would he answer Rashi's question as to why Menafet is a tolda of sorry, the other way around. Why is nifut of tsemer not always included in dosh? Every time I comb tsemer, surely that should be included in dosh, based upon at least Rashi's view. And we'll see there's a number of answers to this question, but one possible answer to this question is that even though a behema is Gedolei Karka, nonetheless the product of a behema may not be Gedolei Karka. And we saw this svara in the Chasam Sofer, who said that cholov, milk, is not Gedolei Karka, but a cow is Gedolei Karka. And if it's possible that the view of the Rambam is that wool is not Gedolei Karka, and a cow is Gedolei Karka, and therefore nifut of tsemer cannot qualify under dosh because the tsemer, the wool, is not Gedolei Karka. So this is a second point which I think I touched on in the last year, but I wanted to just spell out clearly. And before we go any further, any questions on that? Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay. So either way, it's clear from Rashi at least that the melacha of that nifut, when it's with Gedolei Karka, is a tolda of dosh, and when it's not with Gedolei Karka, it's the av of menafet. However, the Rambam disagrees with this, and this is the Rambam also that I printed in the source sheet. This is the Rambam in Perik Tes Halacha Yud Beis, where the Rambam says, "Hamenafet es hatzemer, o es hapishton, o es hashoni kriyotz memchayiv." So the Rambam learns that nifut of cotton wool is included in the melacha of nifut tsemer, of combing wool, and it isn't an example of dosh. In which case, he holds that even though cotton wool is Gedolei Karka, and therefore does qualify as dosh, nonetheless, if you comb cotton wool, if you comb cotton, it counts as the tolda or ko'av of combing wool, rather than being dosh, or rather than just being dosh. So according to the Rambam, what's the difference between menafet of our Gemara and menafet of his scenario? What's the difference between our Gemara, which says that menafet is a tolda of dosh, and the Rambam, who in Halacha says that menafet is a tolda of that combing cotton wool is the same as combing wool and included in the melacha of wool? And I think the answer to the question is that where you comb out seeds, Rashi uses this language of givolim, which are the shells or the cases or the seeds of the plant, or indeed where it's classic seeds, like with cotton wool, where it seems there's literally seeds that you have to comb out. In these cases, that would be the melacha of dosh. However, when you're merely combing the wool, just to comb it and to smooth it and to thin the threads, then that's the melacha of menafet. So basically, it would appear that there's a confusion of terminology going over here. Nifut literally means combing, but there's two reasons why you might comb. You might comb because you're trying to remove the seeds or separate it out, in which case it would be melacha of dosh, because that's what dosh is, some form of breaking things apart. And that's different to nifut of wool, which is about combing the wool to create smooth fibers in order to be able to make them into threads. That would appear to be the difference, the two uses of the word nifut. So the commonality between the word nifut is that there's a combing taking place. Rashi says the distinction is whether you're combing Gedolei Karka or combing wool. However, the Rambam doesn't learn that distinction because the Rambam says that even combing cotton would count as an av of combing wool. The Rambam would appear to learn that the difference is, what are you doing? Are you combing in order to smooth out fibers, in which case the melacha is combing? Or are you combing in order to remove seeds, in which case the melacha is a tolda or the av of dosh? And I think this is mafurish in the Me'iri on our sugya, and I printed the Me'iri over here, in which the Me'iri says, he says, V'yesh mafarshim, hamanafetz pishton, this is the final source on page 2. He says, V'yesh mafarshim, hamanafetz pishton u'begevolov, if you comb pishton from its seeds, or manafetz semagefen bekashes, or you comb the cotton wool with its seeds, kedera she'umnu nosin, as professionals do, or mafarik hagarinim imenu, and you detach the seeds from it, kulon tolda the dosh, they're all a tolda of dosh. So he seems to say that the essential feature over here is that you're removing the seeds. And then he carries on at the end of the line, when you're combing wool, who av b'fnei atzmo, it's its own av, enu tolda the dosh. Why? She'ein sham nifutz garinim, there's no nifutz garinim at toichat sameh. V'oid she'enu megedolei karka. And secondly, it's not gedolei karka, and therefore it counts as a separate melacha. So the Me'iri, who anyone who knows the style of Me'iri knows he collects lots of different explanations of the Mefarshim, gives both explanations. He says Rashi's chiluk that it's not gedolei karka, but he also says the other chiluk that in one case you're combing to smooth it out, and in another case you're combing to remove the seeds and the like. Now the truth is, once we see the Me'iri's chiluk, I'm not really sure what to make of Rashi, because it seems this is too good a chiluk to unlearn once one's learned. And I'm left confused over here a little bit, that it's true that both melachos are called combing, but they appear to be radically different in their function. When you comb wool, you're combing to straighten the fibers. When you comb cotton wool to straighten the fibers, then that would be part of that melacha. And when you comb wool, cotton wool or flax to remove the rubbish, the psoles, the seeds and the grate and the shells, then that's dosh. So what exactly does Rashi want? Why does he give his distinction? Surely the distinction is that combing wool is nothing, is a separate thing. So I haven't really learned the melacha of menafetz in the context of semeh, so I'll just pose that as a question. But there does seem to be another chiluk over here. It's just important to understand this, that combing is one melacha when you're doing it to remove psoles, and it's another melacha when you're doing it just to straighten the fibers.
Would the idea of kavanah help, just as the Rambam has got when he's using the tolda of mafarik of dash? He says specifically there that you need kavanah for blood, if you're using the blood, or if you're using the milk, you have to have the kavanah for that. So I wondered whether perhaps you need kavanah, in the case where you have a tolda of dash, you need kavanah to be doing the thing which counts as dash. Did that help?
So it's not a general rule that a tolda versus an av, there's a distinction in kavanah. However, you are correct in what you're saying, and I would refer you to Zoma v'Torach Eitim.
Yeah.
It's possible to do the same physical act, and for this to be one of two melachos, depending what your intention is. So if you're removing a branch because you want to harvest the branch as firewood, then that's kotza. And if you're removing the branch because you want to prune the tree and make it grow better, then that's Zoma. And that's true. We saw a whole discussion over there about what happens if there's no kavanah, because there's some actions where it's so inherent in the action what you're doing that you don't need the conscious kavanah. It's a sort of default setting. That's what you're doing. Now, I have no idea about combing cotton wool and combing wool, what the default interpretation of what you're doing is. Nonetheless, it seems clear that there are two separate actions that could be done. You can comb to remove bits of dirt, or you can comb to smooth. And the Me'iri says, and that's seemingly how the Rambam would learn, and it seemingly is a correct thing, that that's the chiluk between the two melachas. Rashi doesn't learn like that. Rashi says the chiluk is gedolei karka or not, and I'm not really sure what to make of the Rashi.
Couldn't you not interpret the, I read it, that potentially on the Rambam, you could be chayiv doing your menafetz two things. You'd be chayiv for menafetz and also chayiv for dash, because when I read the Me'iri, the ein sham nifutz garanim metochat semeh, the implication was that's the maser, that when it comes to semeh, there's no nifutz of garanim. But when it comes to Pishtan, there is automatically, the activity is nifets of going in or whatever, the givulim or something.
No, it's the external thing, isn't it?
Okay, it's external, but the point is it's the activity involves removing a thing. Therefore, potentially you could be hired two things in the one action.
It's perfectly correct that potentially you could do. I mean, I'm not enough of a farmer to know if this is correct or not, but in theory, it would seem correct that you could do one act of combing, which could do both melachos. That's true. Nonetheless, we're still left struggling to understand what Rashi means. If the combing is done to smooth the fibers, then that would be connected to tzemeh. And if the combing is done to break open the garinim or remove them, then that would be a tolda of dosh. If you're doing it for both, then it would be both. So what exactly is Rashi's point over here? Other than the coincidence of words that both are called combing, that conceptually these are two very different melachos taking place. One is about straightening and smoothing the fibers, and one is about removing the seeds. And therefore, these are two separate melachos. I don't understand why Rashi is mixing the two, other than that they both have the same words in Lashon HaKodesh. They are both combing, but they're completely different sorts of combing. And if you can combine both activities in one, then good for you. Then you've done yet another melacha. But so what? So I don't really understand why. I don't really know what to make of Rashi.
What about the idea of pre? Because you've got, in the case of the cotton, it's all part of that, and you have to get rid of the bit which is from the pre itself. While the wool is clearly a pre, and therefore might have a different. Therefore, nifut has a different concept. It's in that case.
That's correct. I'm agree. Yeah, I think that's correct. Okay, so that's the first point on the sugya. The next thing on the sugya is the view of Rabbeinu Chananel, which I also printed in the source sheet. Rabbeinu Chananel says that the malacha over here that we're dealing with of dosh is cleaning out the afruris min ha'oichel, the dust and dirt from it. I printed this in the middle of page 1. It says Rabbeinu Chananel hadash who am a farik kapasolas and mechaperes ba'oichel or mechinosam lebreira o kavari ba'kada am anafit nofis afruris min ha'oichel. So he says that you are removing the mud and the dirt that gets caught up in it. In other words, these are agricultural products. They grow in the ground, and dust and little stones and earth and rubble gets mixed into it, and you're cleaning these out from the product. Now, why does Rashi not learn? By the way, in my in the Gemara that I'm using on in Untitled Chapter, they've got a footnote in which the Sefer Aruch also learns the same pshat. The Sefer Aruch I've mentioned before in this context. He was an Italian Rishon who wrote the first dictionary on Gemara, and you see from how he translates terms very often how he learns a sugya. And the Sefer Aruch, a very important Rishon, the Sefer Aruch learns the same as I happen to see. The Sefer Aruch learns the same as the Rach, the same as Rabbeinu Chananel on the sugya, and he quotes this view from the Gaonim. He says Pirish Gon. The Gon says whenever you quote a Gon without saying which of the Gaonim you mean, it normally means Rav Hai Gon. So Pirish Gon, he says that the nifutz here is from the dust. So he brings this tradition from the Gaonim, which fits well because Rabbeinu Chananel very often follows the views of the Gaonim. So one sees a consistency in that base of medrash that descended from the views of the Gaonim. That the nifutz over here is the nifutz of removing earth and dust and dirt from the fibers. Now, why does Rashi learn differently? Why doesn't Rashi like that? So there's a possible good answer to this question, which is a Rashi later on in Daf Kuf Mem Hey Omid Aleph, in which Rashi seems to learn that dosh only makes sense when you're removing dirt which grew together with the product. After all, threshing, the whole point of threshing is not just cleaning things. The whole point of threshing is that you are removing the seed cases which grew with the fiber or with the product itself. And therefore, that's the malacha of dosh. So the Rabbeinu Chananel and the Aruch who learn that you're removing dirt, it seems that Rashi would learn that this isn't the malacha that we're talking about over here. This isn't the malacha of dosh, and therefore that's not how they explain it. And Rashi, as I said, really makes his point explicitly in Kuf Mem Hey Amud Aleph, Divrei Masel Potter, in which he talks about liquids absorbed inside pickled vegetables. And Rashi says this isn't dosh, because this isn't a liquid that grew inside the vegetables that you're squeezing out. If you squeeze juice out of a fruit, that might be dosh, but not when you squeeze fruit out of pickles, which have just absorbed a liquid. That wouldn't be dosh. In which case, we have the equivalent. The reason I mention this is because this ties into our previous discussion about agricultural melachos. We saw in Melachas Ma'ameh, for example, who is shown in that said that you're only chayav in the Melacha of Ma'ameh when you gather it in from the place where it grew, or where it's the first time you've done a gathering and not the second time. And the logic behind that is because this is an agricultural melacha. Now Rashi says that menaches dosh is only with gedulei karka, which means that Rashi is conceptualizing dosh as an agricultural melacha. We discussed already, as one moves down the 11 steps of the melachas of hachana of bread, of preparing bread, the final ones, cooking and baking and so on, or work in food, they're not agricultural melachas. Harvesting and sowing seeds and ploughing are agricultural melachas. Rashi learns that threshing, dosh, is also an agricultural melacha. It's not preparation of food, it's preparation of agricultural growth. And therefore Rashi learns that it's only dosh if it grows with it, as opposed to if it's other dirt that came in extraneously. So that might be the pshat, and why Rashi argues with the Rach and says that this is the packaging within it, within which it grew.
Is there another point with the Rabbeinu Hananel that he goes on to talk about? It seems to be it's a situation of chibur, and you're moving it from chibur to me'urav. In other words, when we beat this thing up, it's a chibur situation. It's tied together. It then splits apart, but they're still mixed together, and hence the next malacha's boreh, which is so you move. I thought one of the key points is moving from a chibur to me'urav.
Yes, I agree.
So I am going to come on to that point in the Rach. I'm going to come on to it later because we need to determine what the difference is between dosh and the malacha boreh. We've already learned the malacha boreh. Boreh means sorting and separating, which is the next stage of preparation, and sieving and all these other malachas. And we're going to have to understand why isn't that dosh. So we will come back to this Rach to look at the point that you're raising. At the moment now, what you're saying is correct. I'm simply not focusing on it because I'm still trying to just understand dosh in its own terms. And the Rach says that separating out dirt is included in dosh. And Rashi would seem to say that separating out dirt is not included in dosh because it has to be something that it grew, as the mixture has to be one within which it grew, rather than just separating out any old mixture. So that's a possible answer to Rashi. Now, I saw another answer, and this was not my own Bekias. I saw this quoted in an Likut Sefer. There was this idea is quoted in the name of someone called Naftali Halevi Hertz. The first chief rabbi of Jaffa was Naftali Halevi Hertz. We're talking here in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Does anyone know who Naftali Halevi Hertz's successor as chief rabbi of Jaffa was? So it's Rav Kook. The next chief rabbi of Jaffa was Rav Kook, after which he then went on and became a chief rabbi of mandatory Palestine. But at the time, Rav Naftali Halevi Hertz was the chief rabbi of Jaffa, big Talmud Chacham, a Kabbalist, a Makubal, and a follower of the Torah of the Vilna Gaon. And he has a very nice sefer of footnotes on the Vilna Gaon. And as I said, I saw a reference sefer which sent me looking at what he has to say on the topic. He says a very interesting point over here. He says the reason why Rashi is chodik on the Rabbeinu Chananel and says that this isn't talking about combing out the dirt, is because it's not gedulei karka. He says that you're only chayiv. We already said that you're only chayiv in the melacha of dosh if it's gedulei karka, according to Rashi. So he says the dirt has to be the gedulei karka, the object you're removing has to be gedulei karka, and if it isn't gedulei karka, then you're not chayiv in melachas dosh. In other words, when Rashi says that ein dosh elo b'gedulei karka, or the Rambam rather says ein dosh elo b'gedulei karka, does that mean the dirt you're removing has to be gedulei karka, or does that mean the product you're getting has to be gedulei karka? He says that Rashi maybe would learn that since the offer is not gedulei karka, therefore it wouldn't count as the melacha of dosh. Now, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but in practical halacha, this is a source of a big debate. For example, why are you chayav when you squeeze a garment, water out of a garment? Now, Rashi would say that's not the melacha of Sochet or Dosh because it didn't grow like that. But according to halacha, we don't paskin like that. La halacha, we paskin if you wring a garment of its liquid, you're chayav because of Dosh. Would this only apply to a garment which is gudurei karka, made from natural fibers? Or would it even apply to a garment which isn't gudurei karka? Maybe it would depend on this. Is it the object that's being squeezed out that's gudurei karka, or is it the object that's being squeezed that's gudurei karka? This brings us back to the Chasam Sofer, which we mentioned already, in the context of cholev, because the Chasam Sofer points out that with cholev, the animal from which you're squeezing is gedurei karka. The milk which is coming out is not gedurei karka. That's the view of the Chasam Sofer. Now, in the analogy, the animal in this context is like the dirt. It's the thing you don't want, and the milk is like the fiber. It's the object you do want. And the Chasam Sofer is of the opinion that since the dirt, the thing from which you're squeezing, is gedurei karka, is an animal, that's enough to make you chayiv, even though the milk that comes out is not gedurei karka. And therefore, this would be consistent with the view of Rashi that it's the object that you are extracting it from that has to be gedurei karka, as opposed to the object itself. So anyway, this is just something that needs to be thought about. I want to use the last few minutes that are left, though, to talk about the most fundamental question of all, which is actually what is the malacha of Dosh on a very basic level. So first of all, how is Dosh different to every boreh? How is it different to every case where you separate oichel mitoich b'solas? So one answer to the question can also be found in the language of the Rach that we have just been learning, because Rabbi Zobin says, Hadosh, he says it's mefarik b'solas hamechuberes ba'oichel. You are, mefarik means dismantling something which is mechubar, mechuberet, it's attached to the food. And then he carries on and he says that this process is a preparatory process for sieving and sorting, where you have a mixture, where kulon movorin, where they're all mixed up, ve'ena mechuberes, and it's not attached. So Rabbeinu Chananel is very clearly learning, and this was Adam's point, that dosh means detaching dirt which is attached to the food. Then that's what threshing is. You have the grain attached to its shell. Whereas boreh is then separating a mixture when it's not attached, it's just mixed, and therefore you have to separate it off into its two parts. And that's why there's a sequence of melachos that take place. The first thing is you thresh, you break it apart, and the second thing is you sort. So this seems very clear, and this is explicit in Rabbeinu Chananel. However, would dosh include all separation of things which are joined together, or only where it's enveloped? Now, the classic case of threshing, the classic case of dosh, you have the casing around the wheat grain, and you crack it open to get the grain out, and that's what dosh is. Similarly, we saw with the Gemara earlier, which it said that when you separate a date from its dekel, when you throw this clod of earth, Omra Popam, under Shota Pisa, Radikla, Chayv Shtaim, Achas Mishum, Todesh Achas Mishum Mafarik, and Rashi said that the Mafarik that we're talking about with the date is that you separate it from the machbedas, from the sort of cluster of date. Is malach of dosh only when something is immersed and surrounded and enveloped, or is the malacha even when it's not enveloped? And this gets us to the confusion I have about what exactly is the agricultural process of preparing linen and preparing cotton wool. And is the fiber enveloped in a casing when you do the malacha, or is it merely that mixed into the fiber are seeds and you're removing the grains and seeds that are mixed into the fibers? So if anyone is able to clarify for me what the malacha is there, I tried to Google it, as I said, and I couldn't get a clear picture of what exactly goes on. If anyone's able to shed some light on this, I'd be very grateful. I saw that a couple of you posted links. Did you manage to work out from these links what actually happens when you produce linen and cotton wool?
Well, it certainly looked to me that the separation of the seeds from cotton were cracking out in the way that you described for wheat.
It doesn't sound like it's cracking out.
I think it looked like it was. I mean, the chap who's, both that's why I posted both of them. It was reasonably clear, I thought, when the man was pulling off the cotton from the bale of cotton, but when the person who used the pasta machine and pushed the cotton ball through, and what was left behind were these seeds.
Right.
That looked to me very much like threshing.
Right. So you're cracking open a shell, you're saying?
I think you're extracting from the internal.
You can extract from the internal thing.
Internal.
Okay.
When you look at a cotton bush, I mean, you can just see the cotton. You don't see the seed.
Right. Because if we can also research what happens when you do linen or flax growing, I'd also be interested there, whether it's in a shell or whether it's really removing of the seeds. Could be when lockdown finally eases, we'll have to do a field trip, a bait field trip out to cotton farms somewhere and have an actual look at it. Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll stop there, and I wish everyone a good day, and thank you very much as always.
Thank you very much.
And I will post some new Maramakomas around the issue of the difference between Dosh and Borah and that topic. I am thinking in my mind that we will probably then jump. We've done the Sugya of Borah, but the truth is the Sugya of Dosh really carries on on Ein Daled Amud Beis, I believe, where it talks about squeezing the chilozim to extract chelas colouring from it. So maybe we'll have a look at that, and then that way we'll tie up the loose ends of Dosh, and then continue. There's various other melachos there. There's not making kosher and matir and various other things. So I'm thinking in my mind that's how we'll go through the sugya, but I'll let you know via WhatsApp how we carry on.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
evening, one and all.
Thank you.